When you step into the woods before dawn, the weight of a rifle in your hands carries a specific kind of psychological comfort. It creates the illusion that you are the absolute apex predator, dictating the terms of your environment. But the moment you pass the tree line, every safety net built by modern society evaporates. The silence is an absence of help, leaving you entirely on your own. Isolation creates a sudden, invisible vacuum, and within that vacuum, humans can quickly find themselves pushed straight to the bottom of the food chain by threats they never saw coming. In the fall of 1992, two hunters named Josh and our narrator were finishing up a routine, successful morning of turkey hunting in Belmont County, Ohio. They hauled their game back to an old blue Ford F-150, completely relaxed. Without any warning, a bullet tore through the air, thunking heavily into a tree directly over their heads. Seconds later, another crack split the silence, and a second round kicked up a clump of dirt less than 3 feet from Josh's boot. The men were violently pinned down behind the truck. They were trapped in an open dirt patch against an unseen shooter who held the overwhelming tactical advantages of extreme distance and heavy woodland concealment. Unable to safely reach for their own shotguns, they waited in absolute terror. They counted to 3. A bear. Authorities convicted a man named Thomas Dillon of murdering 5 people across Ohio. Dillon explicitly hunted outdoorsmen with a long rifle. Human predators actively weaponize the isolation of the deep woods against those who assume they are alone. A direct ballistic attack is terrifying, but a psychological stalker operates on a completely different axis. In November 2021, a young hunter in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, arrived at his isolated 70-acre private lease to find his environment subtly manipulated before he even laid eyes on the intruder. As the sun rose, he noticed a cheap, weathered ladder stand bolted to a tree 60 yards away. It had not been there the week prior. Stranger still, the light snow around it showed no return tracks, only a single trail leading straight to the base of the stand and stopping dead. This animated map breaks down the spatial layout of the stalker's trap. From his high vantage point, the hunter finally spotted a man in a dirty gray hoodie standing behind a nearby tree. The man gave a slow, stiff wave to acknowledge he was watching, stepped back behind the trunk, and vanished entirely. As the diagram updates, you can trace the unseen path the stalker took while the hunter was paralyzed in the tree. The stalker fenced in the area, tying strips of orange hunting vest to branches at eye level and hanging a dead squirrel by a wire along the hunter's only direct exit path to his vehicle. The psychological breaking point hit when the hunter reached his truck. He found his backpack unzipped and his gear precisely lined up in the snow. His truck door was hanging open. As he finally locked himself inside the cab, he looked back to see the stopper standing at the tree line, smiling and dragging a finger across his own throat. Psychological stalking operates as a weapon of sheer attrition. By systematically moving gear and marking territory, the predator manipulates the victim's environment to paralyze them with the crushing certainty that they are constantly being observed. That creeping vulnerability compounds when you add extreme geography and remove sight. Take 3 hunters who hiked 10 miles deep into the mountains to set up camp by a creek. Once the sun drops in a valley like this, inescapable isolation sets in. In pitch blackness, the brain is subjected to sensory deprivation and forced to rely entirely on hearing. So when a loud, terrified scream of a woman erupted from the dark woods, the hunters had no visual context to accurately locate or identify the threat. They tried to project authority. One hunter fired warning shots straight into the air and yelled out into the timber, but the display of force failed completely. The screaming simply moved closer, edging right up to the boundary of their firelight. Then the perimeter broke. Fast, heavy footsteps charged directly through the center of their campsite, and a sharp object slowly dragged along the thin nylon fabric of a tent wall. Traditional displays of armed force mean absolutely nothing against a threat that refuses to step into the light. The men were entirely neutralized, reduced to panicked prey hiding in the dark, rifles pointed at a zippered door until dawn. The final escalation on this spectrum of threats occurs when psychological dread crosses the threshold into an unexplainable, violent physical assault. This happened to a young hunter and his grandfather near an old, secluded state gamelands house. It began with the overwhelming, nagging sensation of distant surveillance, a figure peeking from behind the tree line a mile away. But when they returned to the property after a quick supply run, they found their freshly hunted deer carcass hanging up, mutilated by massive claw and bite marks. While tracking whatever damaged their kill, the grandfather fired at a shape in the thick brush. In response, the dark woods erupted with intense, heavy footsteps and a horrifying, unearthly scream that chased the two men in a desperate sprint all the way back to the structure. They slammed the heavy wooden door and locked it, assuming the house would provide sanctuary. But the unseen creature immediately began hurling its massive weight against the wood, producing violent, terrifying screeching sounds as it tried to break in. Pushed to his absolute limit, the grandfather leveled his rifle and fired blind rounds directly through the center of the front door. The bullets connected, prompting a final shriek of pain before the heavy footsteps retreated into darkness. Once an unknown entity physically assaults the final structural barrier separating the inside from the outside, the human mind's ultimate safety net is permanently destroyed. The individuals in these case files walked away without a physical scratch, yet they all share a permanent psychological scar. The baseline paranoia established during these encounters ensured that none of them ever stepped foot in the woods alone again. The wilderness is an ancient, indifferent ecosystem. It doesn't care about our technology or weapons. Whenever humans cross the tree line, we have to accept the harsh reality that we are guests in a hostile environment,